Deep in the mountains of Colorado, a research team expected nothing more than another broken machine. But what they uncovered was a creature thought to exist only in myth, a baby dragon whose voice could bend light, stir hearts, and change humanity forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The morning at Aurora Field Station began like many others, cold and quiet, with the thin light of dawn sliding across the Colorado mountains. The research team was busy with their usual routines, logging data, running checks on the energy barriers, and preparing for another long day of observing anomalies near the dimensional rift. Dr. Lena Faraday sat with her usual cup of bitter coffee, her eyes scanning the endless reports that never seemed to shrink. She thought it would be another ordinary morning. She was wrong. The silence of the lab was broken by an unusual sound coming from the far end of the containment bay. It was a steady beeping, rhythmic, almost musical, unlike any alarm or system alert they had heard before. Jace Rowan, the young intern who was already late for his duties, rushed to the console. He assumed it was another equipment failure. After all, the aging machines at the station had a reputation for breaking down when least expected. Professor Halem Quinn, known for his sharp humor even in stressful times, leaned over the monitor with a raised brow. He expected to see a faulty signal. Instead, the readouts showed something entirely different. The sound was not mechanical. It was organic. It was coming from the sealed transport pod, delivered by a geological survey team only an hour earlier. The pod had arrived under strict security. The survey crew had been exploring near the shimmering rift in the mountains when they discovered the capsule. They claimed it contained something alive, though none of their instruments could identify what it was. They insisted it be taken straight to Aurora Field Station, where specialists like Dr. Faraday could investigate. Now the pod sat in the bay, humming with strange signals. Lena set down her cup with a trembling hand and walked closer. Her heart pounded as she listened. The tones rose and fell in patterns that felt deliberate, almost like speech. "Is this a malfunction?" Jace asked, his voice breaking the tense silence. "No," Lena said quietly. "This is something alive." The small team gathered around the pod, their breaths visible in the cool air. The containment field glowed faintly, holding in whatever lay inside. As the sound continued, Halem adjusted his recorder, shaking his head in disbelief. "I have studied 17 alien languages," he muttered. "None of them sound like this." Slowly, the pod hissed open. The team braced themselves for danger. What they saw instead left them stunned. Emerging from the shadows was a small creature, no larger than a dog, its body shimmering with turquoise scales that reflected the bay lights like gemstones. Its folded wings twitched as it stepped onto the floor with careful grace. But it was the eyes that held them. Bright, intelligent, curious eyes that scanned each human in turn as though studying them. Then it opened its mouth. Not to roar, not to hiss, but to speak. The sound that filled the air was unlike anything they had heard. It was a blend of chirps, whistles, and deep rumbles, layered with harmony that seemed too complex for one voice. The station's universal translator clicked on automatically, trying to make sense of the sound. The screen filled with question marks and percentages that shifted wildly, unable to lock on to meaning. Jace stumbled back, wide-eyed. "It's talking. I think it's actually talking." Lena forced herself to stay calm, though her heart raced with awe. She took a slow step forward, careful not to appear threatening. "Easy," she said softly. "We mean you no harm." The creature tilted its head at her words. Then, as if in response, it gave a low, pulsing sound that vibrated through the air and into the very walls of the station. The lights above flickered, the containment field shimmered, and then, to everyone's shock, the vibrations shaped themselves into visible light patterns. Bright colors swirled in the air above the pod. Lines bent and twisted into glowing forms. The patterns shifted, creating a symbol that resembled a question mark. It hung there in shimmering light, a single, undeniable sign that this was not an animal acting on instinct. This was communication. Professor Quinn's jaw tightened as he recorded every second. "Dear heavens," he whispered, "this creature is not just alive. It is intelligent." Lena's hand trembled as she lowered her scanner. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. In all her years of study, nothing had prepared her for this. The creature was not hostile. It was not afraid. It was reaching out, trying to speak, trying to connect. Jace's voice shook as he looked between the team and the glowing patterns. "What do we do now?" No one answered. The creature continued its sounds, each one weaving more color into the air, like it was painting with light and sound at the same time. The patterns grew faster, forming waves that shimmered with an almost musical rhythm. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the beginning of something that none of them could explain. The containment bay felt smaller, filled with the presence of this impossible being. Every heartbeat echoed with the sense that history was being written in that very moment. Finally, Lena spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "We listen. We start by listening." And as the creature's song filled the room, carrying shapes and colors across the air, the team realized they were witnessing the most extraordinary discovery of their lives. They were no longer staring at a specimen. They were standing at the edge of a conversation with something beyond imagination. And in that moment, one truth became clear. Nothing at Aurora Field Station would ever be the same again. The strange creature had quickly become the center of life at Aurora Field Station. By the second day, everyone on staff knew about it. They whispered in the corridors, hurried to the containment bay during their breaks, and shared theories that stretched from the logical to the fantastic. Dr. Lena Faraday spent nearly every waking hour near the pod, her eyes studying every twitch of the creature's wings and every note of its unusual voice. The sounds were no longer dismissed as noise. They carried patterns. Jace Rowan, the eager intern, had taken to recording the morning sessions on his personal device. He noticed that each day began with the same sequence of tones, a steady opening melody that seemed like a greeting. After that, the creature shifted into longer streams of sounds, always ending with the same 7 rising notes that echoed in the bay like a signature. Professor Halem Quinn was the first to suggest that this was structured communication. He gathered the staff in the observation room one evening and replayed the recordings. His voice carried the excitement of discovery. "Listen to the transitions," he said. "Each shift in pitch marks the end of one section and the start of another. This is not random. This is organized." The staff sat in silence, listening to the creature's voice filling the room. Realizing that they were hearing more than sound, they were hearing thought. Dr. Faraday made another breakthrough during a routine medical scan. She moved the device slowly over the creature's chest, and at that moment, it produced a soft, pulsing hum. When she shifted the scanner over its wing, the hum changed to sharp clicks. Then, as she passed near a hidden injury in the thin membrane, The creature extended its wing and produced a sound that almost felt like correction. "It's helping me," Lena whispered. "It's showing me where to look." Beatrice Morgan, a volunteer coordinator who had worked with animals across planets, confirmed it. "It's responding to your actions," she said with wide eyes. "It understands what you're doing." The team soon realized the dragon-like being was not passive. It was guiding its own examination, offering cues that made the process more accurate. This changed the way they approached it. The creature was not an experiment. It was a partner. Jace, still nervous around the creature, but fascinated beyond measure, began comparing daily recordings. He noticed that the morning broadcasts always followed the same shape: a greeting, several sections that resembled commentary, and finally, the repeating 7 notes at the end. "I think it's giving us reports," Jace said during a late-night discussion with Halem. "Like it's telling us about what happened the night before." Halem's skepticism had softened by then. He rubbed his beard and admitted, "It's possible. It may even be sharing news in its own language." The true revelation came from Solara, the station's artificial intelligence. Solara monitored everything from life support to food systems, but its algorithms were also capable of complex analysis. While the translator failed to process the creature's sounds, Solara approached the problem differently. Instead of treating the sounds as language, it treated them as music. During the morning briefing, Solara's voice filled the room. "The creature's vocalizations are not limited to sound," it announced. "They are creating resonance across multiple frequencies: radio waves, infrared, even fragments of visible light." The team watched as Solara projected a hologram of the data. The recording showed patterns layered on top of each other, building like a symphony across dimensions humans had never used for communication. Dr. Faraday stared at the projection in awe. "It's not speaking to us," she whispered. "It's speaking to everything." As if proving the point, the creature released a new sequence of tones. Solara translated the frequencies into light, and the room filled with glowing colors that shimmered like auroras. The staff gasped as shapes formed in the air. Curves bent into what looked almost like a question. Professor Quinn leaned closer, his voice quiet. "It's asking about us." The days that followed turned the station into something like a concert hall. The creature performed daily, each session drawing more staff into the bay. Some described the sounds as songs, others called them lectures. Whatever the truth, it was clear that this being was creating structured performances, weaving light and sound into something that crossed the boundaries of ordinary language. Jace grew bolder in its presence. He often lingered after his shifts, speaking to it in his own stumbling way. To his surprise, the creature responded with new tones, softer and playful, as if imitating his voice. "It knows me," he said one evening, wonder shining in his eyes. Meanwhile, Solara refined its interpretations, translating more sound patterns into colors and shapes. The performances became breathtaking displays of moving light, accompanied by tones that resonated in the chest of anyone who listened. The staff stopped seeing it as a specimen. They began to call it lyric, a name inspired by the flowing cadence of its voice. But the most astonishing moment came when Lyric created a display that filled the entire bay with shifting waves of light. The shapes stretched outward like hands reaching across space. Solara translated the resonance into a phrase that appeared on the projection screen: "Seeking connection." Dr. Faraday felt her breath catch. Lyric was not simply demonstrating intelligence. Lyric was reaching for something deeper. In the quiet that followed, every person in the room felt the weight of the discovery. They were not just studying a creature. They were part of a conversation unlike anything humanity had ever known. And as Lyric continued to weave patterns of sound and light, the staff of Aurora Field Station understood one truth that could never again be forgotten. They were standing in the presence of a voice from another world, a voice of wonder, and it was asking to be heard. The creature that the staff had begun to call Lyric was no longer just a research subject. By the third week at Aurora Field Station, it had become part of their daily lives. Every morning, the team would gather in the containment bay, not out of duty, but out of anticipation. Lyric always began the day with its signature opening melody, followed by patterns of sound that lit the bay with shifting colors. What had started as observation now felt more like conversation. Dr. Lena Faraday noticed how Lyric responded differently to each member of the team. When she entered the bay, it greeted her with soft, steady tones, almost like calm reassurance. When Professor Halem Quinn arrived, Lyric produced sharper, more questioning notes, as if engaging in debate. And when Jace Rowan stumbled in with his usual clumsy energy, Lyric offered playful whistles that sounded like laughter. It became clear that Lyric was not only intelligent, but also deeply social. It recognized people, remembered their behaviors, and created unique responses for each one. Jace was the first to test this idea. One afternoon, he held up a drawing he had made of the bay and pointed to the shapes. Lyric tilted its head, then released a sound pattern that formed a glowing image in the air, almost identical to the drawing. The entire team gasped. Lyric was not just mimicking. Lyric was interacting. The bond deepened when food entered the picture. The staff had been feeding Lyric a standard nutrient paste, gray and tasteless. One morning, Lyric examined the offering, released the long, unimpressed trill, and turned away. The meaning was obvious. It did not like the food. Jace, always looking for ways to prove himself, decided to take a risk. He brought a small container of stew, a family recipe that had won him praise back home. He carefully placed it in the feeding chamber. Lyric approached with suspicion, sniffed, and let out a short, skeptical buzz. Then it took a small taste. What followed stunned everyone. Lyric's pupils widened, its scales shimmered brighter, and it released a cascade of joyous sounds that filled the bay with light patterns resembling applause. From that moment on, Lyric favored Jace above all others. Whenever he entered the bay, it created a special greeting, a rhythmic whistle, unlike anything it used for anyone else. Jace, once the nervous intern, now carried himself with pride. "It knows me," he said more than once, and no one doubted it. Solara, the station's artificial intelligence, also formed a bond with Lyric. The two began creating displays that merged sound and light into breathtaking performances. Staff members started gathering during their breaks just to watch. Some called them concerts, others called them lessons. Whatever the label, the impact was undeniable. Lyric and Solara transformed the cold metal bay into a place of wonder, a theater of light and resonance. One afternoon, the station witnessed Lyric's most extraordinary act of empathy. Amara Wells, a young researcher who had recently joined the team, was having a difficult day. Her grant proposal had been rejected. Her equipment kept failing, and she felt overwhelmed. Standing outside the containment bay, she slumped against the wall, trying to hide her frustration. Inside the bay, Lyric stopped its routine. It moved closer to the energy field and tilted its head. Then, it released a soft, tentative sound, one that carried a tone of concern. Amara barely noticed, lost in her thoughts. Lyric tried again. This time, producing a gentle rhythm that matched the pace of her breathing. The sound shifted into a soothing melody, slow and steady. Amara lifted her head. The sound seemed to reach directly into her chest, calming her heartbeat. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the strange comfort of knowing she was not alone. "Thank you," she whispered. Lyric answered with a low purr that resonated through the bay. In that moment, the connection between human and alien became undeniable. Later that evening, Amara recorded a short clip of Lyric's comforting sounds on her personal device. Without much thought, she uploaded it to the global network with the caption, "This little dragon noticed I was having a bad day and tried to cheer me up." She expected only a few friends to see it. Instead, the video spread like fire. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. By the next morning, millions of people across the solar colonies had seen it. Comments poured in from every corner of humanity. Some said it was the most beautiful sound they had ever heard. Others claimed it helped them sleep or soothed their anxiety. One message came from a family on Europa, saying their daughter, who struggled with panic attacks, listened to the clip repeatedly and found comfort. Another message said simply, "If aliens can be this kind, maybe there's still hope for us." The quiet research station, once isolated and overlooked, was now at the center of attention. Journalists demanded interviews. Scientists requested data. People everywhere wanted to know more about Lyric. But for those inside Aurora Field Station, the truth was already clear. Lyric was more than a discovery. Lyric was a bridge between species, a bridge between sound and emotion, a bridge between despair and hope. As the staff gathered that night, listening to Lyric's luminous patterns fill the bay, they realized their work had changed forever. They were no longer just researchers studying an unknown creature. They were caretakers of a voice that carried across hearts and across worlds. And as Lyric ended the day with its signature closing notes, each one rising higher than the last, the team sat in awe. The gift was not just in the sounds or the light. The gift was in the connection. A connection that would only grow stronger. A connection that would change everything. By the 6th week at Aurora Field Station, Lyric had become more than a guest. It had become a part of the daily rhythm, a living presence that filled the corridors with sound and light. Yet as the days passed, the staff began to face a difficult truth. The station was never meant to house such a being for long. Decisions had to be made about Lyric's future. Meetings stretched late into the night. Scientists across the colonies demanded access. Government officials suggested moving Lyric to secure facilities. Research councils argued about ownership, while media channels ran endless stories about the dragon that talked in light and sound. The attention was overwhelming. Lena Faraday could feel the weight of it pressing on her. She knew the creature was not an experiment to be controlled. It was a life that needed a home. Professor Halem Quinn warned that many proposals saw Lyric only as data. "They do not see what we see," he said during one tense discussion. "They see a specimen. We see a being." The words lingered in the room. Jace Rowan, who had become Lyric's closest companion, clenched his fists. "If we send it away to one of those places, it will die inside," he said. "Maybe not physically, but the part that makes it special will vanish." The debate reached a breaking point when an unexpected letter arrived at the station. It came not from scientists or governments, but from Thomas and Evelyn Hartwell, an elderly couple living in a valley near the mountains. They wrote with simple honesty, describing the quiet that had filled their home since the passing of their old service dog. They had space, knowledge of animals, and most of all, love to give. "We do not want a pet," Evelyn wrote. We want to offer a safe place for a being who clearly longs for connection. Family is not always about species. Sometimes it is about choosing to care for one another. The staff read the letter in silence. Lena's eyes softened as she looked at the words. "They understand," she said. "They see Lyric as we do." A visit was arranged. The Hartwells arrived in their aging vehicle, dressed in their best clothes, as if coming for the most important meeting of their lives. Lyric was in the middle of a morning performance when Thomas stepped into the observation chamber. The creature froze mid-note and turned. For a long moment, silence filled the bay. Then Lyric approached the barrier and released a deep, layered harmony that resonated through the walls. It was not like the structured sequences of before. It was something new, a song of recognition, sorrow, and hope woven together. Thomas, a man hardened by years of illness and quiet grief, felt tears fill his eyes. He laughed through them, the first genuine laugh in years. Lyric tilted its head, released a questioning chirp, then pressed its snout against the containment field where Thomas's hand rested. A low purr filled the bay. Evelyn whispered, "It has chosen." The decision was no longer in doubt. Paperwork and permits took weeks, and the staff worked tirelessly to prepare. A habitat was built on the Hartwells' land, carefully designed to meet Lyric's unique needs. Thomas threw himself into the project with energy he had not felt in years. The barn became a sanctuary with open platforms, a warm pool, and a system that allowed Solara, the station's AI, to stay connected with Lyric from afar. On the day of transfer, half the station staff gathered to say goodbye. Each person received a personal farewell from Lyric. To Lena, a soft medical hum that suggested perfect health. To Halem, a pattern of sharp notes that resembled a question, as if promising future debates. To Jace, a sequence that sounded like a recipe, playful and personal. Even Solara received a shimmering display that looked like a hug of light. The journey to the valley was quiet, filled with expectation. When the pod opened in its new home, Lyric stepped out with confidence. It explored every corner of the habitat, vocalizing as though cataloging its new world. When the acoustic system hummed to life, Lyric immediately released the pattern that summoned Solara's voice. "Hello, my friend," the AI said gently. "I see you have arrived safely." The barn lit up with color as Lyric answered with a display of joy. Days turned into weeks, and Lyric settled into life with the Hartwells. Every morning, Thomas entered the habitat with a carefully prepared meal. Lyric greeted him with a unique song that belonged only to him. Evelyn kept a journal of daily interactions, documenting Lyric's moods, discoveries, and performances. Over time, visitors were welcomed. Children, veterans, and families came to listen to Lyric's concerts, each leaving with stories of comfort and healing. Lyric grew larger, its scales deepening into sapphire. Its songs grew richer, blending sound, light, and frequencies that scientists still struggled to explain. Yet, what mattered most was not the science, but the lives it touched. People spoke of anxiety eased, of grief softened, of joy rediscovered. Lyric became more than a wonder. Lyric became a healer. Years later, a documentary team visited the Hartwells' farm. They captured the image of Thomas sitting in his chair, Evelyn reading aloud from a book, and Lyric curled nearby like a giant, glowing companion. Solara filled the walls with gentle light patterns. Lyric began to sing, weaving Thomas's heartbeat, Evelyn's steady breath, and Solara's tones into one harmony. The translator offered a simple phrase: home found, love shared, tomorrow certain. The world would remember Lyric as a discovery, a miracle of xenobiology, and an artist whose songs reached across species. But for Thomas and Evelyn, Lyric was family. For Lyric, the valley was not a cage, not a station, but home. And as the evening light faded over the Colorado mountains, Lyric sang once more, not to the stars or the world beyond, but to the family who had given it what it longed for most, belonging.